We're going to be continuing our conversation in the book of Proverbs here tonight. But before we go there, actually, this is something that kind of came to my attention as I was doing some research this week and just some emails and some communications and things. I didn't know this until today, but September is actually Suicide Awareness Month, which different organizations promote. And so I thought it would be good just for us to pause for a second before we get into our conversation tonight and just let's be aware of a couple of things. And I think one thing that's consistent whenever it comes to the issue of suicide is that there are not always obvious warnings when people are depressed, when they're thinking about taking their life. And I think for you guys in particular, as teenagers living in the midst of 2020, like the stresses that you guys have been experiencing have only been ramped up with the pandemic, with everything that's going on. And stress is such a huge, anxiety are such huge issues when it comes to issues like depression and suicide. And so just a couple of thoughts here. There's a lot of things that we've all kind of experienced to some degree or another, regardless of where you go to school. First of all, you haven't been able to see your friends in person as much, or if at all, right? Some of us have friends that are just not comfortable being in person with other people right now. And so I'm praising the Lord for this group that even when we were in streaming only, you guys were all connected, you were all together, and that at least, and I'm really thankful now that we're able to be together. But that's such a factor when you can't see people. Isolation breeds some of these kinds of things, right? For some of you right now, school is 100% online. Some of you went back into the classroom for the first time since, February, over the last week. And so that's crazy, right? It's partially digital for some, it's remote for others, right? I think remote working conditions are some of the most stressful types of conditions, regardless of the fact that you're sitting in your comfy chair at home, like trying to connect with your teacher, trying to connect with other students. Like there's just so many different things that can impact our stress level there, right? You guys have lost a lot of your social outlets, your sports, your hobbies, although thankfully some of those things are back. But idle time is something that really impacts us when we feel alone, when we feel lost, when we feel isolated, right? That influences our lethargy, like when we don't care about things, right? When we begin to feel depressed, right? And all of us are anxious to some degree or another over whether this is going to get over anytime soon, right? We're depressed that we can't see our friends, right? Maybe we're angry that we lost out on a lot of our summer plans from 2020, right? So I want to share with you guys tonight just a couple of quick thoughts, and then we'll get into our lesson. But number one, you guys are not alone, all right? You guys are not alone in any of these experiences, and I don't mean that to diminish in any way, shape, or form the anxiety or the stress that you and yourself might be feeling. Each one of us experiences those things differently, uniquely, all right? And so it's important that, you guys don't hear me say that just get over it, right? We're all together. We all experience the same thing. Just know that, right? What I want you to know is that you're not alone, right? We're all together in this, okay? You're not alone in what you're experiencing, and you're not alone in figuring out how you should feel, okay? All of us are wrestling with these complicated types of emotions and trying to understand what we're feeling and how we should move forward with that, right? You're also not alone because God has surrounded you with people who love you and care about you, okay? I can say that for every single person in this room, whether or not I know your family, whether or not I know your friends. I know God has surrounded each and every person sitting in this room tonight with friends and family who truly love them and truly care about them. Even if our minds and our hearts sometimes tell us that nobody cares about us, nobody notices me, right? Nobody knows what's going on. I promise you, God has put people in your life for a reason. Right, and you're not alone in that, okay? You're also not alone because Jesus Christ ourselves, the one we just sang about, who went to the grave for us, right, to live so that we might live, okay? He experienced, when he was here on earth, all of our stress and all of our isolation, right? Isaiah 53 is a powerful passage, talks about prophetically the work that the Messiah would do, and it talks about how he was crushed, and he was misunderstood, and he was alone, okay? Jesus experienced everything that you're experiencing right now here in the midst of 2020, and maybe that you've been experiencing even before these situations, right? And he also promised that he would provide his spirit to be with us, right? God himself is with us in the midst of our isolation, in the midst of our loneliness, in the midst of our struggles. So I want to give you guys two quick to-dos, and then, like I said, we're gonna talk about the book of Proverbs, okay? My to-dos for you tonight, this is for every single person sitting here, whether or not you feel like, oh, I'm struggling with anxiety, I'm struggling with stress, whatever the case might be, I still want you to do these two things tonight. Number one, I want you to talk honestly to God about the struggle that you're experiencing. Whatever your stress is, whatever your anxiety, whatever you're feeling, I want you to talk honestly to God about it, right? Maybe even talk to him out loud. There's something really powerful about vocalizing the things that we feel within, getting them outside of our heads, outside of our hearts, all right? And speaking them to God and just be honest, Lord, here's where I am. I'm struggling with this. Please help me. That's what the Psalms are, you guys. The Psalms are the writers calling out to God in the midst of sorrow and hurt and loneliness and pain for help. Right? So follow that example. And then the other more challenging one that I want you all to pray about, I want you to do this at some point. I want you to talk honestly to someone that you trust about the anxieties and the experiences that you're feeling right now too, okay? That could be a friend that you know is going to be trustworthy with the information. That could be your parents. I know your parents would love to walk through those things with you. It could be a youth leader. It could be a teacher. It could be just someone you trust that you know is going to give you good advice, all right? That's going to help you through that experience. All right, I want you to be open and honest about, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling stressed out about this, I don't know how to handle this, whatever the thing is. Those are your two to-dos, okay? Talk honestly to God about your hurts, fears, and worries, and then talk honestly to someone you trust about them too. Are you guys with me on that? All right? This is all just, a very brief conversation about a very big issue, a very thing that we could spend weeks and weeks and hours talking about and how to work through some of these things. Every single one of us has been touched by suicide in some way, right? Whether that's an extended family member, someone at your school, right? Someone that you know even from a remote degree of separation, right? We all know people that have chosen this unfortunate decision, right? And we want to make sure that we are doing the work on our own hearts and in our own relationships to love each other well and make sure that we're walking with the Lord and trusting in the confidence that He's able to give us. Are you guys with me on that, right? Just a real quick overview there. Let's turn to the book of Proverbs. We're going to look at Proverbs 3. I'm just going to pray real quick, and then we're going to open the Word. Heavenly Father, thank you for this group of young men and women who love you, who I believe genuinely want to love each other well. I pray that you would use tonight to encourage our hearts, shape us, and help us think biblically about how we should make decisions and how we should choose our values and allow those to govern our lives. So be glorifying us tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. So as we started this conversation last week, we talked about sort of an overview of the book of Proverbs. We talked about how Solomon's purpose in the book of Proverbs is a couple of things: to know, to give, and also to receive instruction. So the process of growing in wisdom is not like hey, once you reach a certain point, you know it all, and then all you're doing is pouring out into other people, right? Rather, wisdom is an ongoing thing. I'm always learning. I'm always figuring out, hey, there's so much more that I need to grow. Okay, so that's Solomon's purpose: to know, give, and receive instruction. And his target audience is what he labels the simple one. And I promise you, it's not an insult, even though it sounds like an insult, right? Rather, he's talking about someone who's young, someone who is impressionable, someone who is able to be influenced, okay? And he is concerned that someone who maybe in that boat could be easily deceived or persuaded in the wrong direction, right? And he is concerned that he wants to give wisdom so that person can become wise and be an influencer, not someone who's easily influenced. So basically, to summarize all that, what we talked about was our first wisdom principle of our series. And each week I'm going to give you another wisdom principle. So last week's wisdom principle was that true wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord. Right? We talked about the fear of the Lord, and that it's not like, oh, I'm in terror of this God that I cannot approach. Rather, Jesus in his death made it possible for me to draw near to the Father. And so I fear God by recognizing that, man, I have been forgiven so much. I am a wicked sinner who by grace alone, through faith alone, has been able to draw near to this God who is holy and awesome and mighty and powerful. And that, you guys, what we believe about God is going to inform everything that we do. Okay, so that's to bring you guys up to speed. Tonight we're going to talk about probably what I'll say is the most unpopular wisdom principle in our repertoire. And so I'm just going to put it out there, and you guys can all groan together, okay? Wisdom principle number 2 is obey your parents. Everybody groan all together. Obey your parents. Okay, no, seriously, that's our wisdom principle number 2. Let's look at the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, and let's talk about why this is such an important wisdom principle. Wisdom principle number 2, obey your parents. Proverbs, chapter 3. And we're going to read the first 12 verses together, and I promise this won't be an entire bummer, okay? So Proverbs 3, verse 1. Solomon, writing from the perspective of a father, says, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." And here's probably the verses you guys all know, verses 5 and 6, right? "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will be bursting with wine. I know you all have barns and vats that you are very concerned about taking care of, right? We'll come back to that in a few minutes, all right? Verse 11 says, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him who he loves, that is, he instructs or rebukes him, all right? And as a father, the son in whom he delights, okay? So let's talk about this together, okay? Wisdom principle number 2, obey your parents. And here's what I want you guys to take away from tonight's lesson in a nutshell. True wisdom comes from sitting under the specially appointed teachers that God has given each one of us, okay? True wisdom comes from sitting under the specially appointed teachers that God has given each of us. Now, the specially appointed teachers that God's given us is not limited to your parents, right? God has given you all kinds of spiritual people in your lives that can really instruct you and lead you and guide you. And that's a wonderful thing. That's a community called the church, okay? And God wants us to be influenced by all these people that have wisdom and can teach us. But primarily speaking, all right, your parents are the primary authority that God has placed in your life for a season, right, to teach and instruct and lead you, okay? And they're the primary authority that he's placed there. So it's not wisdom to reject that, all right? As a matter of fact, look with me. We're going to take just a real quick tour here. Proverbs 1, turn back to Proverbs 1, all right? Look at verses 8 and 9, all right? We have this same petition here that Solomon gives. He says, hear, my son, your father's instruction. Forsake not your mother's teaching. They are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck. He envisions their teaching as like jewelry, like an ornament that shows wisdom and success and prestige, and it's beautiful, right? Turn over to chapter 2, verse 1, right? He says, my son, if you receive my words and treasure my commandments with you, making you attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding, then verse 5, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Again, petitioning as a father. Chapter 3 begins the same way. Chapter 4 begins the same way. Hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. And he actually talks about how when I was a son with my father tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, so on and so forth, right? This is a generational thing. His father taught him, and now he's teaching. Chapter 5 begins the same way. My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion and your lips may guard knowledge. Here's the point I want you guys to see, okay? Solomon is saying, I have been given this responsibility, right? You hear it in the way he is pleading and reasoning with his own son and saying, listen, I've been given this. I want to give it to you. I have wisdom that God has given me. I want to share it with you. Take it and bind it on your heart. And he's doing this because the 10 Commandments have told him to do that. As a matter of fact, so Proverbs 3:1 said, my son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Deuteronomy 5, verse 16, this is where we find the repetition of the command to honor our father and mother. Says, honor your father and mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you, right? You hear the similarity of language that in Proverbs 3:2, it said, length of days, years of life, peace they will add. Deuteronomy 5:16 said, that your days may be long, that it may go well with you, right? You hear that similarity of language. And so he's deliberately saying, God has given this command that children should listen to their parents because there is a promise attached to that. As you listen to the teaching that God is giving you through your parents, that there's going to be growth and spiritual well-being, right? It's going to flow from that reality, okay? And so Solomon is saying, God has given me the authority as a parent, and I'm giving you his own words as I'm instructing you, okay? Now, there's 3 tendencies that each one of us, I'm using the word us and we, not because I like to think of myself as a teenager and be younger than I really am, okay? But because these are things that I used to think when it came to dealing with my parents, right? So I may not get not all 3 of these may be your tendencies, but I think I'll hit you with at least one of them, okay? Tendency number 1 is thinking that we know better than our parents because they're out of touch, okay? You guys with me in that? All right, some of you guys might be with me in that, all right? My parents are too old-fashioned to understand where I am, right? And what I need and what's going on in my mind, all right? You guys know, so you guys are Gen Z, okay? According to the experts, you guys are Gen Z, all right? Although Gen Z began in 1995, and so if I were in charge of things, I would have started with the letter A, Gen A, rather than like Gen X, so that like we have more letters to go with. Like, I don't know what they're going to do when we get to like, I don't 2030, we have to do a new generation, Gen XA or something. I don't know. Anyway, Gen Z is the fastest evolving generation, all right? Thanks to social media, thanks to the smartphone, thanks to information being so accessible. Things for you guys in particular, this is unique to you guys, are changing so quickly in terms of understanding the world, in terms of how we think, in terms of the way we operate. So let me ask you guys a question, okay? How many of you, and I know we'll get a couple with this, right? How many of you actually like and listen to the music that your parents like and listen to? Okay, a couple of hands. I knew I was going to get Mason back there. Okay, great. A couple of folks here, we like the music of our parents. Okay, that's good. Okay, but not everybody. Notice you're in the minority if you like your parents' music. Okay, how about this? Do you use any of the slang words that your parents use? A couple of slang words that your parents use. That's even less people. Okay, how about, do you dress like your parents did or do, and or do you wear your hair like they did at their age, at your age? Okay, all right, got a couple hands, all right, but less people, okay? By the way, I was reminded last week, I won't say by who, so in my vernacular, in my language, okay, I refer to our hoodies and t-shirts and things as swag, because that's like, but largely because of that episode of The Office where Michael Scott is talking about swag, stuff we all get, right? And so that's usually why I say it, but I was reminded that I should be saying drip, right? That's what I should be saying. Okay, right? Is that accurate? Okay. Yeah. So my language is changing. My slang is changing. Your slang is changing. Okay. And so here's the thing I want us to grasp from this, right? There's a disconnect between what our preferences are, the way we speak, the way we think, the way we present ourselves. All right. But let me challenge you with this thought. Okay. We always make the assumption that our parents don't understand us, but do we really understand them in return? Okay. Can we not say the same thing in reverse, right? That my parents don't understand me. Well, do you really understand them, right? Do you know what their experiences were, what their background was, okay? There's a lot of things. Just I'm learning, I have a 2-year-old now, okay? I'm learning so much about parenthood that I didn't know before I was a parent, right? Things that I didn't understand before I was a parent. One of the things that I'm really learning, and this is, I'm so blessed with this, is that I'm getting a unique insight into the way that God the Father looks at wayward children, right? As us as his wayward children, because now I have a child who's often wayward. Okay? He wanders and he doesn't do the things that I want him to do all the time, and I have to correct him and teach him and instruct him, right? And I get an insight into the heart of the Father who wants the best for his son, right? And is heartbroken when his son settles for something less. Okay, well, that's like, it's an insight that I'm gaining. I'm so blessed by that, right? And what I want you guys to think about is maybe you would say your parents don't understand you, but you don't understand necessarily them either. You didn't walk in their shoes, okay? As a matter of fact, your experiences this year in 2020, during COVID-19, during the pandemic and all the things that are associated with it, right? Your kids will not understand, right? When you have children one day, a lot of your thinking about your education, about how the world works, about hygiene, right? All these types of things that are happening now are gonna have an impact on you later that your kids are not gonna understand. They're like, why is mom and dad so like, why do they insist on hand sanitizer everywhere, right? Or, why do they never touch any doorknobs, okay? Like, that's something that your kids might not understand, okay? And so we have to understand that there's an experience that we don't necessarily grasp unless we've really lived that out in our own way, okay? And it's not going to be so much later in life that what your parents are trying to teach you now that it's really going to fully make sense, right? I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard this, but that's the reality, okay? We don't always understand in the moment why our parents are so insistent on certain things, on certain values, right? On certain disciplines, on certain chores even, okay? But we have to recognize that they are trying to teach us, they're trying to teach us, and that there is a value in that because they are the primary authority that God has placed over us at this age, all right? So that's our first tendency, thinking we know better than our parents because they're out of touch. They don't know quite what's going on in our lives. Tendency number two is as a teen, sometimes I will fake it, okay? That means I do what my parents want me to do, but I'm really just holding on to my ideas and values and waiting until I get out of mom and dad's house to live how I want, okay? I don't know if that's anybody in this group, but I'm just kind of going through the motions. All right, I get it, mom and dad, I'm doing it, and maybe I'm even doing it with a good attitude, but really I'm just waiting to get out so that I can do and live and pursue what I want to do, okay? I'm just waiting to have that freedom to do what it is that I actually want to do. So you have my commercial there. Are you able to pull that up? So I was gonna play a quick commercial here. So I'm an old person. I listen to the radio sometimes, okay? And none of you listen to the radio unless it's like Caleb or something, all right? But this is a commercial that's playing recently. So Ty, can you play this for me? Turn it up.
Offering an extra 15% credit on car and motorcycle policies, that's 15% on top of what Geico could already save you. So what are you waiting for? Your dentist to actually believe you?
And you're flossing every day.
Absolutely.
Great. And you're cutting down on your sweets?
Of course.
Wonderful. Then I don't even need to look in there.
Great. See you in 6 months. There's never been a better time to switch to Geico. Save an extra 15% when you switch by October 7th. Limitations apply. Visit geico.com for details.
Okay, awesome. How many of you guys wish that would work, right? I've flossed, I haven't eaten any candy, and the dentist just says, okay, I trust you, go home. I'm not going to clean your teeth. Anybody wish that would be the reality? Okay. Anybody else hate the dentist? Everybody likes the dentist? Whoa, okay, that's crazy. I'm talking to the wrong crowd here, okay? Well, here's the deal, all right? Like, what good is that actually going to do if you get away with that, right? I'm flossing. Oh, yeah, I'm not eating any candy, right? It's fine. You don't need to look. Like, okay, you get away from the discomfort of having that annoying scrapey thing on your teeth, right? Okay, which, by the way, I hate the water pick more than the scrapey thing. Okay, you ever had the water pick? It's like high-pitched and cold, and you can hear it in, like, your brain. It's like the worst thing in the world, okay? I hate that. I would love to get out of that, and if I have the choice, I'm always choosing the scrapey thing, even though it, like, grates in my ear. It's awful. I hate the dentist. I've had a ton of bad dentist experiences. But anyway, right? If I get away with that, I'm still going to end up with cavities, right? My mouth's going to be a mess. I'm going to be disgusting, okay? So it's better to actually understand and value going to the dentist, right? And having the actual cleaning and treatments done that I need to so that I have a healthy mouth, right? And I think the same thing is true of us with our parents, okay? Rather than just saying, Mom and Dad, you know what? I'm just going to do what you want to do and right now, and then when I get to be 18 and I have my own place, okay, or, I live with somebody else, then it's going to be great. And I'm going to do whatever I want then, but I'm just doing this now to make you happy, all right? What I want you guys to understand is that true obedience from a biblical perspective is not just cognitive. That is, I don't just like agree with it in my head, but I agree with it in my heart, right? I follow through because I know this is a value, all right? I'm consenting from within. We tell Zeke all the time when he's obeying, he has to do it with a happy heart. So he'll go like this. And he'll do whatever it is we want him to do, right? Like really, he's kind of like, usually it's like, that's his happy heart, right? But we'll say, Zeke, you have to have a happy heart, okay? So he puts it on his face. I know it's not here yet, right? I know it's not here yet. But the muscle memory of like, okay, I've got to obey Mom and Dad. I've got to do what they want me to do, like, and it's going to get here eventually, okay? We have to work on our hearts to recognize that the values that our parents are trying to teach us, even in the stupid, annoying chores, okay, are there to teach us something for a reason, all right? As a matter of fact, being wise means taking the Bible-based teachings of my parents and inscribing them on my heart. You heard that language, right? Proverbs 3:1, Solomon said, let your heart keep my commandments. Notice he didn't just say, do my commandments. Right? He said, let your heart keep my commandments. Value it, cherish it, understand it. And then he said, using the language of like the 10 commandments, in verse 3, write them on the tablet of your heart, right? Take these things that I am teaching to you because they have the very commands of the Lord, right? Put them on your heart, value them, understand that they're so important. Tendency number 1 is thinking that we know better than our parents are out of touch. Tendency number 2 is we just fake it to get through. Tendency number 3, and this is the one where I'm going to get all of you, right? Complaining to my friends about my terrible parents. Complaining to my friends about my terrible parents. I will not ask for a show of hands. I will not ask for a show of hands, but you know who you are, okay? Complaining to my friends about my terrible parents. I'm going to show my age one more time. There's a show that used to be on TV that I like. It's called Seinfeld, okay? Very old show. And there's some people in the back like that, all right? Jerry, basically all the characters in the show are like terrible people. They live in New York City. They take advantage of other people. They're always just, thinking of themselves. But one of the running jokes in the show is whenever somebody offends somebody else, usually Jerry, he gets all defensive, and he'll turn to one of his friends like George or Elaine, and he'll say like, I didn't know, like what was I supposed to do? I'm a human being. And they immediately jump to his defense. They're like, yeah, you're just totally human. It's fine. What could possibly go? Like they're like defending him. He's like panicking because he knows they're offended, and he's like just trying to justify whatever decision he made, right? And the other person is like totally jumping into their defense, right? So what we usually do, you guys, is when we have a beef with our parents. Okay, there's another one of my old slang things. Okay, when we have a beef with our parents. Okay. When we're upset with our parents about something, right, instead of addressing the issue, instead of trying to talk to my parents respectfully, humbly, gently, right, I just, text my friend, right, or I message my friend. I'm just talking about how terrible my parents are. I'm talking about the problem versus talking to my parent, right, and what I'm gaining is a sympathetic ear, somebody who's like, oh, yeah, that's the worst, right, and I'm just having my opinions reinforced, aren't I? Okay, if I'm really honest, I'm just having my opinions reinforced. I'm going to someone who I know is going to agree with me, right? They're gonna make me feel better about myself and my decision, okay? But I'm not really getting help. I'm just getting someone who's sympathetic to where I stand, all right? Now, your friends might have some different perspectives, but they still have the same blind spots, honestly, all right? The people that we go to for support when we're upset most likely have the same blind spots that we have. They're just going to agree with us. True accountability, right? The kind of accountability that the Bible would tell us to have sympathizes with pain, but it's going to challenge us to think biblically about how God wants us to respond. In other words, if I go to Emma and I say, Emma, I'm so upset with my mom. She's the worst, right? Emma's going to say, you know what, Justin, you have a legitimate reason to be upset, but here's what God would want you to do, right? You should talk to your mom, right? You should express how that's hurtful, right? But ask for her to help you understand, right? Like a friend who's truly going to keep you accountable is gonna help you understand. Like you need to go about this the right way. They're gonna say, yes, that's a bummer, that hurts, right? That's unfortunate, but okay, here's what you should do moving forward. That's what true accountability does, guys. We don't want to have any of those three tendencies. I know we have them, all right? We need to be above and beyond that, right? And I believe that you guys, I say this all the time, I believe that you guys as teenagers who love Jesus, right, are capable of so much more than the average teenager is, right? You guys are capable of so much more. You guys can live above these tendencies and not reject the parental authority that God has placed in your life. Again, because that's the primary thing that God has placed. You don't, by the way, you don't find youth pastors in the Bible. You don't. Or you don't find youth leaders in the Bible, okay? Because the parents were the ones who instructed in God's law. The parents are the ones who instructed in God's word. That should be the pattern that we follow today as a church, all right? And so what I want you guys to understand is that even though your parents are imperfect, all right, they are the primary spiritual authority that God has placed in your life for the season, okay? That's our wisdom principle number one. Let me give you just a couple more thoughts here, and then we'll start to wrap up, all right? Oh, by the way, real quick, okay? You know, Jesus also submitted to his Father, right? That's something we understand as we study the Gospels, that we know there's this complexity because Jesus is God the Son, and God the Son and God the Father are one, and the Trinity, and that's all really confusing. But Jesus, in his role as the Son, coming to earth and dying for our sins, expresses to God the Father in the Garden of Gethsemane, Lord, I want something else, right? In that moment where he knows I'm going to go to the cross for each and every stinking sinner, okay? And I'm going to bear, Father, your wrath that was intended for them, but I'm going to step in their place, right? He says, I want another way. But he says, nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will, all right? If Jesus can model that, you guys, then we can do the same thing when it comes to, my mom wants me to take the garbage out in a timely fashion, all right? Like mountains and molehills, okay? But let's understand that we can have the ability to do that because Jesus modeled it for us. Again, parents aren't perfect, right? But we are called to obey and honor them from a willing heart. So it's not wisdom to reject their authority because they're the primary spiritual authority in my life. It's also not wisdom, you guys, to assume that I am wise, okay? Which I know sounds like duh, but don't we all do that? Like I just assume that I know things rather than like figure out whether or not I actually do, okay? And that's pride. Look at how verses 5 through 8 mention this, right? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. Guys, we do that all the time, right? I do that all the time. My default reaction is not to assume that I don't know something, but to assume that I do. That's a problem. That's pride, all right? I don't want to lean on my own understanding. Rather, in all my ways, I want to acknowledge him. He will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Also, notice how wisdom is again tied to the fear of the Lord, right? It's not just I know how to live life practically separate from spiritual things, right? Our true wisdom comes from living spiritually according to the fear of the Lord, worshiping the Lord in every area of my life. That's going to order my wisdom in the way that it should be, okay? Remember last week I asked you guys how many of you like to read the instructions, or how many of you like to just dive in, right, when you're building something. So I actually had a real-life experience with this week. My wife and I made a trip to IKEA, right? And when we went to IKEA, it was like waiting in line for like opening night at a movie. It was like the line was snaking around the building, and it was like we pulled in, and I'm like, I have to do this. Like, it was awful, right? But it actually moved pretty quickly. We got in line, and they were letting, like, I don't know how many people they were allowed in the store at one time, but we got through the line, and we bought two things. We bought a new dresser for the new baby, and we bought a new toy thing, toy organizer for Zeke's toys. So we got home, and I'm putting this thing together. Anybody ever put IKEA things together? Right? They are, like, amazingly engineered, but not always the most intuitive in how they're being put together. And all the directions have no words. It's all pictures. It's like hieroglyphics. You're like looking at it, you gotta turn it and make sure. But they're really good directions. It's like, okay, that board has 3 little dots in the top, so I know I gotta put it that way, and then I get down and put that, okay? So like, I'm like reading the directions, but I get into a rhythm, right? Like, cause it's like 3 pieces. I gotta do this cube, and this cube, and they go together. And I get the first one, I get the second one, I've been reading the directions, and I'm like, I got the third one, I'm fine, right? But what I did, there's like one final step that I had to leave something undone. So I get to the point where I've got all 3 cubes assembled, I go to put them together, and then to put like the bottom on, I had to leave this one piece off in order to get that thing in there. And so it's like, all right, I gotta take that off and put that thing on there again. And meanwhile, Zeke is like being helpful. And he so my favorite thing is he wants to hammer, like that's what little boys want to do, they want to hammer things. And so he's like looking for the hammer, and I must have said to him in like an offhanded way, "Don't worry, I'll give you something to hit." And that's what I said to him. And so as I'm putting things together, he repeatedly comes back to me and says, "Something to hit?" The hammer. He's like holding the hammer, "Something to hit." And then like 2 days later, when I'm putting the dresser together, he comes in. Whoop! I think my batteries may have died. Oh, okay, they're still there. That was weird. Anyway, he comes into the room where I'm putting the dresser together, and he just walks in and goes, "Something to hit?" He's like looking. Anyway, I'm reading the directions, and I stop reading the directions, and I realize, I have to undo a portion of this, and I got to start over in some capacity, right? So again, there's a pride element in that, isn't there? As small as that seems, right? Just assuming that I know how this goes, right, is going to lead to me making what's small mistake that I have to take that piece off and put that piece back on, right? But in real life, we do the same thing. I just assume I know the way it's supposed to go, and then I got to backtrack and fix something that was wrong. Okay. By the way, everybody feels really smart until they encounter those math memes, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like, I walk into a room, there's 30 people, I kill 29 of them. How many people are in the room? And like, you have to like figure out and like there's some like reasoning thing in there. You didn't read it the right way. People post their answers, and then it's like, no, that's wrong. Like, the obvious answers are wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And it's like, what? And then you just feel really dumb, and then you like second guess your life choices and all that kind of stuff, right? But here's the thing, right? Smarts, I think we know this, but let's reiterate. Smarts do not equal wisdom. Okay, the ability to anticipate the answer to a stupid word problem is not necessarily wisdom any more than being able to figure out, oh, if I build this way at the end, that's not wisdom either, right? Wisdom, right, is the difference of understanding and applying the things that I know to my life, okay? As a matter of fact, what the Apostle Paul says, he uses this expression in 1 Corinthians 8. He says that knowledge puffs up. In other words, it makes you proud. It makes you all, like a peacock, kind of strutting around and showing off how good you think you are, kind of deal, right? Knowledge puffs up, but he says love edifies. And I think that there's a correlation here between the type of self-sacrificing, humble, caring, genuinely concerned love and wisdom, right? That wisdom is the application of the things we understand. Love is a practically applied wisdom, right? But knowledge, contrasting that, like assuming that I'm smart, right, is going to make me prideful and set me up for disaster, okay? Versus being humble and loving and caring, which will set me up to do well, okay? In other words, I'd be better off to assume that I don't know and learn, okay, rather than assume I do know and suffer, okay? That's the reality, right? I should assume that I don't know and learn rather than assume I do know and suffer, okay? Last thought, and then we'll hit our final point here. It's a big deal in our culture now. We use the expression, you define your truth, right? You do you, right? You figure out what's good for you, okay? Can I just tell you guys, you do not define truth in any way. God defines truth, okay? God defines truth, right? God gives us the freedom of personal expression to certain extents, right? The ability to live our lives in certain ways. He gives us freedom, right? He gives all kinds of beautiful things that are aspects of his own creative goodness, okay? But God defines what is true, all right? We do not define what is true. And real wisdom is going to recognize that God is the source of truth. I am not the source of truth. You guys with me in that, all right? I don't determine what is true, okay? God determines what's true, all right? So it's not wise to assume that I'm wise. It's also, lastly, not wise to live in the moment and fail to think ahead, okay? It's not wise to live in the moment and fail to think ahead. Look at these last couple of verses here in Proverbs, this section of Proverbs 3. Verse 9 said, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. Okay, so again, I know that's exactly what the situation you guys have in your backyards, right? Wine vats and produce barns, and fields filled with plenty. Okay, I know that's your situation. Here's what's being said here, right? We've got an agricultural society that Solomon is talking about, where all of their welfare, all of their wealth was in their crops, right, in their livestock. Okay, and so the measure of whether or not someone had invested well, had taken care, had done the work ahead of time, right, had labored in the fields, had done the weeding, right, all that kind of stuff that I hate to do, there's going to be a result, right? The crops are going to grow, the livestock is going to be there, right? Wise business ventures. So there is a planning ahead that goes into that. And then verse 11 and 12 says, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof, for the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. All right. So two thoughts here: wise planning and stewardship. That is, from a biblical perspective, taking care of things that do not belong to us. And the reality, you guys, is that we don't really own anything. Okay? I know we like to think of all this stuff as our property, right? Especially as Americans, we don't really own this stuff. God has given us these gifts to steward because they belong to Him. Okay. But wise planning, wise stewardship, it takes time and effort, but the results are going to be self-evident. You guys with me in that? All right. Self-evident results, right? Because I'm putting the work in, I'm putting the time in, there's results. Okay. Also, the Lord's discipline, all right, which is spoken of as in something that's inevitable. That means it's going to happen. Okay. Especially when we're falling off the rails here. Okay. The Lord's discipline is not a pleasant thing, but it is a necessary thing for wisdom to grow. Okay. The Lord's discipline is not a pleasant thing, but it is a necessary thing for wisdom to grow. Actually, Hebrews 12 is probably my favorite treatment of how to understand the Lord's discipline. He says, the writer of Hebrews says, at the time, all discipline seems unpleasant, right? But it's going to produce something. It's going to grow something. It's going to change something, okay? I don't know what discipline looks like in your home. All right, I don't know what types of consequences your parents use, okay, to get you to do the things that they intend for you to do, okay? Maybe there are no consequences, and that's half the problem, all right? But here's the deal, all right? God intends for our parents to lead and direct us, including a disciplinary type of process, all right? Because it's intended to change something in you, help you understand the value of pursuing what is good, okay? Because God Himself is disciplining us. Now, what we typically like to do is just, again, live in the moment, do what we feel, right, and just do that. So by living in the moment, by the way, we're talking about not necessarily just like being able to enjoy the here and the now, because that's a good quality, right? Rather, we're saying being impulsive, just making decisions, not thinking ahead, not thinking about the consequences, leaping before you're looking. As a matter of fact, I need to ask, can I ask your permission to share a slightly gross but censored story? Would that be okay? Okay, everybody, this group is very excited to hear a slightly gross but sensitive story. So I have to tell you about a friend of mine when I was in high school. I won't tell you his name because some people in this room may actually know who he is. But he was like this crazy guy, all right? And so like it was this weird partnership where like I was kind of quiet, I was quieter, and he was just crazy and rambunctious, and he would just do stuff. Like he was the kid that would walk into youth group and you have hair all over the place, and if you're wearing some crazy t-shirt, you just run in like screaming and yelling and literally bounced like he like was drinking like a ton of Mountain Dew before he came in, kind of thing, right? And just like all sugared up and crazy. And so the nature of our relationship was basically, I would say, hey, go do that. He would go do it. Right? So like all kinds of things I would say, hey, go do that. Like, it'd be really funny if someone, or like, have you ever thought about this? And just like go do it without thinking about it. Like I was really the instigator, but he was the one who would get in trouble, because he would go do the stupid stuff and get yelled at. Something that I did not tell him to do. Let me clarify this before I even tell the story. Okay, something I did not tell him to do was the thing that actually brought him to a hospital, which was we went on a youth event. Some of you guys, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Camp Halawasa, nearby Camp Halawasa. They used to do, I don't know if they still do, they used to do a whodunit. And so you go as a youth group and they have all these murder mystery stations set up, and you go to one station, you're part of the story, you get some clues, you have to like paid careful attention because like the clues would be hidden in the scene and like in the dialogue and stuff. And at the end you're supposed to figure out who done it, like who killed the guy, right? So we do the thing, and we're hanging out and we're getting ready to go, and my buddy decides he's gonna climb the flagpole at the entrance of the camp. All right, it's just a normal American flagpole, right? And so he shimmies up the flagpole, gets all the way to the top, and then he slides down. Straight down, he's holding onto it like this, right? Slides straight down. Now on the flagpole, if you're not aware, is this thing that goes like this, because you have to like wrap the cord around it for the flag, all right? I don't know if you see where I'm going, all right? And I won't go into any more detail there, but he got caught on the hook, all right? And so we thought he's joking. He's coming down and he like starts like yelling and like freaking out, and he's like clinging even tighter. And I literally had to go over and like pull him off and then put him on the ground, and then he went to the hospital to have something looked at there. So, sorry guys. Really impulsive thing to do, all right? Really impulsive thing to do. True story, all right? But here's the thing, all right? We laugh at that, but don't we make decisions like the same way all the time? Like, I just feel like climbing a flagpole, right? I just feel like doing this, or I don't feel like doing this, so I'm not going to do it, all right? There's a problem, you guys, where we don't think, we just do, all right? And our society is all about don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. Walking in wisdom means that I'm going to have to discern between what God would have me to do and what my desires in the moment would have me do. Right, guys, that's really hard. That's really hard because I'm sort of trained in my thinking to just do, all right? I'm to respond, to react, right? But biblical wisdom would have me think, pause, evaluate whether a desire can be trusted, all right? Or whether I need to say no to that, whether I need to do something else entirely, all right? We are always saying things like, I don't feel like studying, so I won't. I'm just gonna take the test. It'll be fine, right? I don't feel like doing what my parents asked me to do, so I won't. It will be fine, all right? I don't feel like doing the necessary hard conversation with that person that I think might be talking about me. I'm just gonna give them the cold shoulder instead. It'll be fine, right? I don't feel like like doing the hard work to stop looking at pornography. All right, it'll be fine. I'll get over it later. All right, I don't feel like being honest with my parents about what I'm struggling with, so I won't. It'll be fine. All right, guys, we need to stop doing what it is that we feel like, all right, and do a better job evaluating whether our desires are misleading us or whether they're pushing us in the right direction. That's the thing, all right? God has given us all of our feelings and our emotions and the things that we think about and experience so that we can weigh them, so that we can make a decision on that, right? And so often what God has given us is a desire for the right thing, and we sometimes just clamp down on that because it's uncomfortable. We clamp down on that because it's hard, all right? But meanwhile, the Spirit's like, no, go do that, right? That's the good thing. And we're like, no, all right? Usually we just do the thing that feels the most comfortable, all right? And so what that means, you guys, is we have to put our desires in their place. All right, James 1:14 tells us that every person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desires. Right? Using that word for passion, for feeling, right? When that is the focal point, when I'm following that, that's the place where temptation starts, all right? Excuse me. And so our culture entertains this idea, okay, that if it doesn't feel right or it doesn't come easy, then it can't be right, okay? But guys, that is the opposite of self-discipline, and it's the opposite of wisdom. All right, let me say that to you one more time, okay? Our culture entertains the idea that if it doesn't feel right or doesn't come easy, then it can't be right. In other words, if it's for me, if it's the right thing for me, if it's my truth, right, it's going to be easy, it's going to be natural, right? But that's not self-discipline, that's not wisdom, right? Wisdom and self-discipline often tell us to do the things that are uncomfortable and hard, right? Because there's a benefit on the other side, right? Nobody gets the first fruits of their produce, barns filled with plenty, vats bursting with wine, all right? Money in the bank, okay, without working hard, all right? It just doesn't happen, all right? Now, the beauty of this practice, you guys, of putting my desires in their place is that a faithful discipline, I don't know why that's doing that. A faithful discipline will train my desires, right, so that they start to align with God's desires. You guys hear me in that, right? What's hard at first, the more that I work at it, the more that I practice it, the more that I grow in that area, my desires start to shift, all of a sudden that thing is not so hard anymore. Right? All of a sudden, the thing that I used to hate, all right, all of a sudden I've got kind of an affinity for it. I kind of like it. Okay. I can tell you for a fact, for relationships in my life, there are people that I started having a relationship with that I couldn't stand. Okay, like seriously, like the last thing I wanted to do was engage with this person because that he or she would drive me crazy. Okay. The more I prayed for that person, the more that I actually forced myself to spend time with that person, my heart changed, right? And I actually really enjoyed being around that person. Okay, like it is possible, right? But it takes that hard work of investing, of taking time and being obedient to that command, right? So the question really becomes then, do I value my sense of comfort or do I value my holiness? Okay, do I value my sense of comfort, just doing what I want to do, okay, what feels right to me, or do I really value the holiness that Christ is trying to promote in me as I engage with the fear of the Lord and discipline, right? So my first inclination, again, it's always to trust my senses, okay? But as a Christian, the reality is I am no longer a slave to my desires. Okay? I'm no longer a slave to my feelings, to my thoughts, all right? They're hard to wrestle with, certainly, but because I've been set free in Christ, which we sang about tonight, right? We're free indeed, okay? That means I have the ability to do the hard thing and change and grow from it.